What's up YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. Man, has it been a long time since I did my last video. I definitely missed you guys. If you guys missed me as well, make sure you go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button before we get started. Since it's been a while since I did my last video on the Land Cruiser, I thought what better time than now to do a review video on all of the non-OEM parts that I installed in the Land Cruiser. If you've been following my Land Cruiser build for a while, you'll know that I am a true believer of original Toyota OEM parts. Then why, you might ask, do I have some aftermarket replacement parts on the Land Cruiser? There are probably numerous reasons why I went aftermarket, but usually the main one is cost. Some of the OEM parts are just a little bit more than I'd like to spend, or in the case of the ball joint, they don't sell it separately from Toyota. You actually have to get the whole lower control arm and replace it that way. Whatever the reason, those parts have been in the Land Cruiser for at least a few months, if not a year. So let me go through each individual part with you, showing you if there were any differences between the aftermarket and the OEM part. Was it a little bit more difficult to install because of this? And finally, of course, if the part actually held up. Before we get started, you guys have probably noticed this already, but the orange car is gone. So a few months ago, I finally sold it, and the new owner was very happy to pick it up, and he will be rebuilding that car really soon. In its place, I've already acquired a few new toys. Since you guys are always asking about it, let me show you a quick garage update. As you guys can see, I still have the white car. Now, this white car, when I purchased it, it was running and driving with the non-turbo engine. So since then, the guts from the orange car have been swapped in, and now it is a turbo rotary 1.3. The reason why it's still not running is because I'm figuring out the radiator and intercooler situation. That's a whole mess of fabrication and a lot of these fittings and stuff, but hopefully this guy will be running soon. Near future plans for this guy will be probably to install the bucket seat, install the steering wheel. We've got the AEM methanol injection from the orange car that needs to be installed. After that, we should be close to driving. Now, in place of the orange car, I actually picked up a few motorcycles. This guy is a Yamaha V-Star, I believe. I picked it up with a clogged carburetor. However, that's already been fixed and now it runs just fine. This guy roughly has under 5,000 miles on the clock, so it's relatively new. I have been riding it for a little bit. You know, it's my first cruiser bike, and yeah, a little bit different. Along with the Yamaha, I also picked up a Honda. As you guys know, I am a big fan of Honda motorcycles. This guy is the Honda Shadow, the Phantom Edition. So pretty neat bike. This one had no issues. It was fuel injected and it ran just fine. Just needed to air up the tires. And on this guy, let's see, we have 2,700 miles. So this guy is actually relatively new. When you ride it and it gets fully warmed up, you can still smell the engine being broken in. So it's so new that the engine still smells new. Now, on both of these bikes, of course, I've changed the oil before riding because they've been sitting for a long time. But now I think they are ready to go. Over here in the back, we have a Honda CB100. I think this one is a 72, I believe, which is quite old, but surprisingly, it ran when I picked it up. The guy that sold it to me said it had some clutch issue where the if you had it idling and you clicked it in the first gear, it would stall out. So it sounded like maybe a worn clutch or something like that. However, after some tinkering and adjustment of the clutch cable, it runs fine now. I think the clutch just needed to be adjusted. It still slips a little bit and it has somewhat of an oil leak, so that's future stuff that will be addressed. Back here we have my 1995 Honda Elite. This guy I picked up for 400 bucks. As you can see now, it's just being turned into a shelf. I've done a lot of work on this guy already as far as the engine goes. You see it's a brand new car, blah blah blah, all that stuff. I'm still waiting for a piston, a big bore kit basically, to replace, because the one that was in here, I think it melted or it did something weird. There was an air leak. Really fun scooter, these things. 2-stroke, so you know they sound pretty cool. But hopefully I'll get this guy running, and since it doesn't have any fairings in it, I won't be sad if I crash it or anything. But I'm hoping to learn how to do wheelies on this guy. Over here I have my favorite corner. First off, we have the 1994 Honda Elite, which is pretty much the same thing as the purple bike, which is a 95. However, this one actually runs. This one, I've already done all the carburetor and big bore kit. I think it is a 72cc 2-stroke now. Polini Corsa, if you guys are into scooter stuff. This guy, it's funny, on the gauge cluster, it goes up to about 35 miles an hour. But in real life, it goes to closer to 60, I think. The needle actually pegs and it hides under on this side when it's, you know, top speed. So very cool scooter. I definitely plan to keep this one for a while. I don't know, use it as a track bike to, you know, run to the bathroom or get food or something like that. But it's completely street legal. Really fun to ride. So this guy is definitely going to be a keeper for a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. Now, last but not least, we have the Honda CBR 900RR. This guy is my favorite because, ta-da, it has the old school dual round headlights. Now, I think the dual round headlights only lasted from 93 to 94. I'm not too sure. You guys can probably double check. But definitely one of the better lookers. I believe the later models, they changed the headlights to where I think it was a fox eye and then they did something else. Personally, I prefer this guy just because, you know, it looks kind of old school and cool. And the graphic scheme on this one is the red, white, and blue, which I really dig. They don't make stuff like this anymore. This guy is also a carbureted bike, so I do have to ride it once in a while or else the carb will get clogged. This guy I think is mostly stock except for the slip-on muffler the previous owner put on, and I think he hid the blinker lights too. I think this guy was pretty interesting because it was the biggest bike that Honda sold at the time as far as sports bike goes, but it only weighed as much as a 600. So definitely a cool bike. I will be riding and keeping this guy for a little longer. And of course, besides bikes, I still have a few projects that have 4 wheels. First of all, let's start off with the Land Cruiser. Lately, with gas being over $4 a gallon, it hasn't really moved much. I have been tinkering with it here and there, and I will have some new videos to upload pretty soon. Next up is the Volkswagen Touareg. Now, if you guys remember, I think it's been about a year or so since I picked this guy up. Initially, I wanted to make an off-roader out of it, and after the initial tires and some maintenance work done, we took it on some trails and it was tons of fun, but I haven't had a chance to take it out recently because it's been doing daily driver duties. It did get a check engine light. Hopefully it's not gonna cost me an arm and a leg because, you know, Germany, Volkswagen, and all those guys. But I will definitely do a video on that one if you guys are interested. Lastly, of course, I still have the BMW E46, which has been my car for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years already. Probably been with me longer than the Land Cruiser. Now, that guy had a ton of work done to it. It had the clutch, the rear subframe welded up, it had all the bushings done, the oil pulley nut fell off but got replaced with a different one with some safety wire. So that one, a ton of work has gone into it. That one also has a few mods. It was mainly for track days and maybe some light drifting or whatever. But being the middle of summer, I have not touched that car one bit. Hopefully when the temperatures cool down a little bit, I will throw the bucket seat back in, give the car a good wash, and take it out to track and remind myself why I have that car in the first place. Now onto the main event. Hopefully you guys don't mind that I finish up this video from the inside of my house. The garage was just getting too hot and there are killer mosquitoes out there to get me. So like I said before, we're gonna go through each non-OEM item that I've installed onto the Land Cruiser. Now, as of today, these parts have been on there from anywhere, I think is a few months to over a year. Just to clarify, these are non-OEM parts that were installed in place of OEM replacements. So this will exclude aftermarket modifications. So the 5 parts that I'm gonna be going over are: number 1, the CV axles; number 2, the lower ball joints; number 3, the brake pads; number 4, the diff breathers; and number 5, the wheel spacers. I'll also be leaving a link to each of their installs up here somewhere, so make sure you go ahead and check that out. Now, before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button, and if you're looking for more Land Cruiser and Overland content, don't forget to subscribe. Here we go. Number 1, let's talk about the CV axles. Now, these guys I installed roughly, I think it's been over a year. Yes, over a year ago, and they are still inside the Land Cruiser to this day. Now, why did I install these guys? Well, as most of you guys know, 100 series owners know, these guys just deteriorate over time. My boots were completely ripped, even though the axles were still good, but it was definitely time to change. The ones that I replaced them with was the ones from AutoZone, so they just had them in stock. Left and right luckily was the same, so they went right in. Another reason why I went with the AutoZone part is because they offer a lifetime warranty. In case these guys break again, all I need to do is take them back out and they will warranty a brand new one for you, so that's pretty cool. Were there any differences in the axle itself? Not that I noticed. Everything looked very, very similar to the OEM axle. The paint might have been a little bit of a different shade, a black instead of a gray or vice versa or anything like that, but everything went in without a problem. As far as reliability goes, like I said, it's still in there as of today, so I haven't had any bad luck with them. So hopefully they'll go for a little bit longer, but I do have a spare stashed in the back of the Land Cruiser, along with that 54 mil socket in case I do need to change it on the trail. Now, last thing, if I had to do it all over again, would I go OEM? And the answer is no. Mainly because the OEMs is kind of expensive. I believe these guys are 300 something bucks for an OEM replacement, or of course you can do the rebuild with the OEM boot kit, which is kind of nice. But since I have the warranty from AutoZone and it is lifetime, I'll just keep switching them out for new ones. Now, number 2, let's talk about the lower ball joint. Now, the lower ball joint has also been installed in the Land Cruiser for a little over a year now. The reason why I changed this guy was because after I lifted the Land Cruiser, it started making this squeaking noise, and it was a small squeak at first, but it generally got louder and louder, and you would hear it if you went over, let's say, a pothole or a storm drain cover or something like that. And you know, considering the Land Cruiser was the top of the line SUV for Toyota at the time, I didn't expect it to squeak, so we traced the problem down to a faulty lower ball joint. Now, the reason why I went with aftermarket on this guy was because Toyota didn't sell the lower ball joint by itself, even though it was replaceable. You had to buy the complete lower control arm, which, you know, in most cases wouldn't have been a bad idea, but I just didn't want to spend the money at the time. As far as differences go, the lower ball joint, the aftermarket lower ball joint that I purchased from Centric, I believe, was very similar to the OEM one. However, the C-clip design was different. Now, was there one that was better than the other, or was there one that was easy to get out and replace? No, they were both a pain in the ass to get in and out. As far as reliability goes, I haven't had issues with this lower ball joint. It did fix the squeaky problem in my front suspension, so I'm pretty happy about that. Now, if I had to do it all over again, would I go OEM? The answer is probably no, just because the whole control arm would have to come out. Now, if my lower control arm bushings were bad, I'd probably do it, but so far, they seem to be okay. Would I use a different ball joint? Probably yes. I would go with the 555 that everybody seems to really like and vouch for. So maybe when this one goes bad, I will be switching it out for the 555. And for number 3, I would want to talk about the brake pads on the Land Cruiser. Now, these guys were installed roughly about a year ago as well, and the reason why I changed the old ones out was obvious, was because they were kind of worn. I did not know when they were changed last, and I didn't know if they were OEM or not. Now, the ones that I got, they were pretty much the cheapest ones available from Centric. Just regular generic pads, nothing fancy. They probably will wear out pretty quick, but so far it's been pretty good. As far as reliability goes, I mean, like for brake pads, they do the job. It stops the truck. You know, I don't see any gains or losses compared to OEM. As far as braking goes, I'm more concerned about the brake noise, if there's any squealing or anything like that. And so far, there has been none. I do remember having to switch out the hardware for brand new stuff. That is something that is recommended. Not required, but recommended. Usually if you have some squeals or something like that, it's coming from the hardware kit or the what is it called? The pin from the rear brake caliper. I think I did a video on that too. But yeah, all in all, the reliability of the aftermarket pads have been good. Now, if I had to do it all over again, would I get the OEM pads? Maybe. I'm not too sure. I mean, I would want to see, you know, if there was any actual differences, but I don't think there is. I'd get it just to try it out, you know, something different, because brake pads are relatively inexpensive. It's more of like a curiosity than like a definite performance gain. And next up, I want to talk about the diff breathers that were installed in the Land Cruiser. Now, about a year ago, I extended the factory diff breathers with some rubber hose. I think it was some fuel line, so it is at a higher point in the vehicle just in case I went through some water, did some water crossings. However, the first iteration of the diff breathers, I used just the factory vents, which were no good. And finally, I switched over, I think it was a few months ago, I switched over to the actual little breather filters, which seemed to work okay. Now, the reason why I extended the diff breathers and changed them out was because the diff kept on sucking in water during water crossings. And mainly the front diff. The rear, I didn't have much issue. The transfer case was okay. It was mainly the front diff. I think it has something to do with where the CV axles go in and the seal right there. So the differences between the factory vent and the little breather filter that I installed was huge. The vent basically only lets air out and it doesn't let air go back in, which is required if you're going to be going through water crossings, you know, suddenly on a hot day. If I had to do it all over again, what would I change? To be honest, I think I did it over twice already, and the current setup I am most pleased with. So the end result, which what I have right now, which is the extended lines with the filters at the end, is probably the best setup, and I wouldn't change a thing. If you guys want to know why the aftermarket breather filter is better than the factory vent, make sure you go ahead and check out that full video. I'll leave a link in the description down below. And finally, I want to talk about the wheel spacers that I put on the Land Cruiser. Now, technically, it isn't an aftermarket part that replaced an OEM part. However, it is a really cheap version of, quality spacers. So I feel like a lot of people had questions regarding how they rode and if they lasted or did the wheel fall off or something like that. So first of all, the reason why I put spacers on the Land Cruiser is pretty obvious. So then I can space the wheels further away from the wheel hub, hence to clear the bigger size tires that I'm running, which is a 315/75/16. Now, a happy, I guess, side effect of this is the stance of the vehicle, I guess, looks a lot better. The wheels aren't as tucked into the wheel well, which looks kind of cool, you know, if you're into that type of stuff. I kind of am, so it was an extra bonus for me. Now, the differences. Now, from the obviously there's no OEM wheel spacer, so I'm gonna compare the really cheap aftermarket ones with, like, you know, some brand name aftermarket ones. Differences, the brand name ones are definitely, you know, a lot cleaner. The powder coating is a lot better, or it's anodized or something. The packaging is better, blah, 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 all that stuff. But as far as actual functionality goes, the spacers that I got, well, at least the second version, the 1.5 inch, do work really well. There is no issues as far as fitment goes. It is both hub centric to the OEM wheel and the hub itself, so it relieves the stress off of the wheel studs when you go over bumps, which should be a regular thing when you own a Land Cruiser. Now, as far as reliability goes, I've had the 1.5 inch spacers on the Land Cruiser for a few months now. Before that, I had the 1.25 inch, but that was no longer available. But so far, both these really cheap Amazon spacers seem to be pretty good. Haven't had any issues with them. They, like I said, they are hub centric, no balancing issues, no weird vibrations, no breaking studs and wheel falling off. And you know, trust me, as far as like putting on lug nuts, I just use the electric impact and zap it on there. I don't use a torque wrench or anything. I know I should, but I zap it on there, and so I stress them out pretty good, and they seem to be holding up. If I had to do it all over again, would I get a name brand spacer? To be honest, probably not, just because they are a lot more expensive, and the cheap aftermarket ones seem to do the job just fine. Instead of getting better aftermarket ones, I would probably look into getting an aftermarket wheel with the correct back spacing, offset, what have you. So that is it as far as my aftermarket versus OEM parts review goes. Hopefully you found it useful so you can decide how to spend your hard-earned cash. A question for those of you who actually wrench on their own trucks: do you prefer OEM replacement parts, or do you mix and match like I do, some OEM, some aftermarket, depending on cost? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm really interested to find out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and for more Land Cruiser and Overland content, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.